So in these verses, Krishna is talking about self-realization. And that is the goal of Bhagavad Gita, and that is the goal of all these Upanishads and different scriptures, to ultimately lead us to understand the self-realization, lead us to experience self-realization. And Krishna is talking about that here. He says that ultimately, if you can if you can establish your mind and intellect into the self, or he says if you can establish your mind and intellect into me, that is the highest, right? So if you can establish your mind and intellect into the self, that way you will be dwelling in the self without any doubt, right? And that is the highest goal that Bhagavad Gita goes after, right? To realize yourself and get established into that self, right? So this is what he's saying: if you are able to completely submerge your mind and intellect into the self, and you're not thinking and contemplating anything else other than the self, uh, then you will be dwelling in the self, and there is no doubt about it, right? So that is the highest way of doing it, so first of all, what is the self he is talking about, right? He says you should be able to establish your mind and intellect to me, right? And here me doesn't mean some kind of a person you need to devote to and uh, get yourself completely submerged in that. The self here means this, the consciousness or awareness, or the deeper uh, nature of ourself, right? Currently, according to Bhagavad Gita and all these scriptures, we are completely misunderstanding our identity, right? And because of that, we are also suffering a lot. So here it is more like, what exactly are you is that self, right? And he's saying if you're able to sort of establish yourself into that, uh, then you're done, then you're free, then you're liberated, right? And that is the highest goal. There's nothing after that according to these Bhagavad Gita, right? And that is the ultimate way of doing it. If you're able to do your mind, if you're able to submerge your mind and intellect completely into the self. And it's not a concept. The self is not something that you understand. You have to be able to submerge into it. You have to be actually able to do this, yeah. So that is the highest. Then he says if you're not able to do that, which is going to be the case for most of us, that our mind and intellect is not under our control and we don't have such a strong desire to realize self or something like that. So he says if you're not able to do that, then practice yoga. Practice yoga and cultivate this desire to understand the self, desire to realize oneself, right? uh, Very interesting advice. So ultimately you want to go there, but if you're not really feeling very strong, very strong desire to attain that, then he says it is smarter, it is wiser for you to practice yoga and cultivate that desire, right? In terms of practicing yoga, he has described many kind of yoga: yoga of action, yoga of knowledge, yoga of devotion, yoga of meditation, mantra, anything. You can practice anything, and you have to be, and the whole goal of practicing that thing so that you can uh, realize what he is trying to pointing out towards, and what is the value of that, right? And with the meditation and with all these different practice of yoga, you are more, we can see more clearly what we are doing, right? What is the end result of what we are trying to do, what we are trying to achieve, this and that, where it is taking us. We currently doesn't have this visibility of what is going on inside ourselves and what is the nature of things, right? So he's saying practice yoga so that you become clear of what is going on, right? And once you become clear, and once you become clear in terms of what he is trying to point out towards, then you will have a very strong desire to realize it. So that is the second step, right? If you can establish your mind and intellect into the self, you understand the value of that, then that's the best. But if you cannot do it, then try to practice the yoga and cultivate that desire, right? Then he says if you cannot practice yoga, if you don't have that desire to practice yoga or something, then work for me, work for the self, right? And that way you can also realize self, right? Very interesting. So he says work for me, work for the awareness of self, or something like work for the God in a way, right? And if you notice, most of these great sages, for example, something like Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, and all these, you know, very great leaders, if you try to see, if you read them, you will see that they are keep saying things like, it's not me who is doing this thing, it is the God who is being manifested through me, and things like these, right? They're not owning their action. They're not saying I am doing all this thing. In a way, they are saying something is being expressed through me, right? And that is the kind of action that Krishna is referring here. If you cannot do the yoga also, then do this. Try to work. Don't do the action for selfish motive and accumulating this and that. Try to express yourself as you are expressing, as you are serving me, right? In that way, right? You are expressing, as a servant of self or something like that, right? So that is the next level, right? So if you cannot practice yoga, then practice this. Practice, because actions are more easier to do, right? That's why the Krishna also started the whole Bhagavad Gita with action, and then he goes deeper into the intelligence and then meditation, all these kind of things. So actions are easy to do, relatively easy to do. So he says, align your action in that direction, align your action in that motive, that you are serving the self, right? And then he says, if you're not able to do that, then try this, devote to me, and then leave all the fruit of the action and restrain yourself, right? And with that, you can also realize self, right? Very interesting. That resort as a devotion to me. I mean, at least have some sort of devotion that there's something more deeper than, all the more mundane and surface level things. And then leave all the fruit of the action and restrain yourself, right? And that is what is creating so much chaos inside ourselves. So in that way, you can sort out uh, the chaos, and then you become more calmer, and then you can move to different levels that way, right? Very interesting. Something that is not very common right now, I guess, but I think this was something, this self-realization, understanding your deeper self, this was something which was the ultimate goal according to all these scriptures, Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, and was practiced at that time, right? But Krishna very nicely, sort of water it down level by level by level, and give us different ways we can move in that ladder, right? So start with, at least start with leaving the fruit of the action, right? Don't get too much attached to the fruit of the action, that I want this, I want that, with a strong selfish motive, and restrain yourself if we are in the starting position, right? So that will be the first step. The second step, then you leave this selfish motive, and in a way you start, acting as an expression of the self, right? Then you move another ladder, you practice yoga, you practice different limbs of the yoga, you practice knowledge, yoga of action, yoga of meditation, different yogas, so that you can understand the value of self-realization, so that you can understand, you have that desire to realize yourself, right? And then ultimately he says you want to ultimately put all your mind and intellect into the self and dwell into that self, and then you know what he's talking about, what the Bhagavad Gita is all about, or what this different Upanishads are all about. And after that he says there's nothing to do, you're done, you're free, right? So very nice step by step plan to realize oneself. Beautiful.